Desert dignity, a tale of respect and courage. The New Mexico sun hung like molten copper in the sky, turning everything it touched into shades of rust and gold. Daniel Cross had just finished checking the water pump when he saw her figure collapsed near his ranch gate. If you want to see how this story unfolds, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. She lay on her side, her tall frame curled against the hard-packed earth. Her bare feet were torn and bleeding, leaving dark stains on the dust. What remained of her dress was little more than shreds of fabric, covered in red dirt and dried sweat. Her back bore the marks of violence, bruises, layered like storm clouds. Some fresh, some faded to yellow. There were no ropes binding her, no guards watching over her, just the merciless sun, the indifferent wind, and the weight of abandonment. Daniel froze mid-step, his heart hammered against his ribs. She moved barely. Her dark eyes opened, clouded with dehydration and pain. When she saw him staring, her entire body tensed. Her trembling hand tried to pull the torn fabric tighter around herself, a desperate final act of dignity. "Stop looking," she whispered, her voice cracking between broken breaths. Those words hit Daniel like a physical blow. It wasn't a plea. It was a command, fragile but firm. The last shred of self-respect she had left. Daniel immediately turned his face away, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. And in that moment, he understood something profound. This woman wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of being seen like this, broken, exposed, helpless. That realization pulled Daniel Cross across a line that would change both their lives forever. Daniel stood with his back turned, his gaze locked on the weathered fence as if it held the secrets of the universe. The desert wind carried the scent of creosote and dust. Behind him, he could hear her breathing, each breath shallow and painful, like something breaking over and over again. He removed his jacket slowly, placed it on the ground, and nudged it toward her with the toe of his boot. "Cover yourself," he said quietly, his voice stripped of everything but necessity. There was a rustling sound, fabric moving, a pained gasp quickly stifled. Daniel waited. No rush. No questions. In the West, there were some things that, if asked too soon, could shatter what little trust remained. When he was certain she'd had enough time, Daniel turned and approached carefully. He knelt beside her the way one might approach a wounded animal, slow, deliberate, unthreatening. She was lighter than he expected, far too light for someone her height. It was as if the desert had been draining the life from her drop by drop. Day by day. Daniel carried her to the grain shed behind the house, a place where no eyes would see, where no judgment could reach. He laid her down gently on a bed of clean hay, then immediately turned away, giving her the privacy she'd fought so hard to preserve. The water barrel sat in the corner, less than half full. The drought had been cruel this year, but Daniel filled a tin cup, placed it within her reach, and stepped back several paces. "Drink when you're ready," he said. No response came. Just the sound of wind whistling through the gaps in the wooden walls and the shed's roof, creaking like the breathing of the land itself. Daniel sat on a low stool facing the door, his back to her. He didn't look, but he knew she was watching him. People who'd been pushed to the edge always watched with caution, with calculation, with a quiet readiness to fight if necessary. Time passed. The shadows shifted. Finally, he heard the soft clink of the cup being set down. "You can stay here until you're strong enough to stand," Daniel said, still facing away. "After that, you choose." It wasn't a promise of protection. It wasn't an invitation to stay forever. It was simply space, the rarest commodity in this harsh land. And in that thick silence, she understood something. This man hadn't come to take anything from her. He didn't need her gratitude, her story, or her submission. Out here, in the Wild West, sometimes that was all it took for a soul not yet broken to keep breathing. When she woke, the light inside the grain shed had softened. It no longer stabbed like blades. She had no idea how much time had passed in this land. Time wasn't measured in hours, but in thirst and breath. She sat up slowly. Every muscle ached as if her body had been taken apart and reassembled wrong. Daniel's jacket still covered her, carrying the scent of honest work and unfamiliar kindness. There were no hands holding her down, no eyes watching from the shadows, only a silence so profound it felt unnatural. Daniel sat outside on the porch, leaning against a weathered post, his hat pulled low. He heard her stir, but didn't turn around immediately. He waited. "Do you need more water?" he asked, his voice steady and calm. She didn't answer. She looked at her hands, scraped, cracked, dark with dried blood. These hands had once been strong enough to hunt, to build, to survive. Now they trembled like a frightened child's. Daniel placed the water jug a few steps away from her, then moved back. The same careful distance he'd maintained before, he honored the invisible boundary she'd drawn. She drank in small sips. The cool water slipped down her throat, and with it came a different feeling, not relief, but the bitter taste of shame. "My mother is dead," she said suddenly. The words fell between them without warning. Daniel looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. He wasn't curious, just listening. "How long ago?" he asked gently. She closed her eyes. "Last winter." No sobs, no trembling, just a bare truth spoken with edges worn smooth by repetition. Daniel asked nothing more, but he saw other things: the way she flinched at sudden sounds, how her eyes constantly searched for exits, the bruises that told stories she hadn't yet spoken. Some questions, once asked, couldn't save anyone. They could only wound deeper. She pulled the jacket tighter, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wasn't lost." Daniel nodded. "I figured." She looked at him, then truly looked, as if weighing whether this man was a place to rest or just another desert wind that would pass. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Daniel Cross." A long pause. Then Luna, Luna, he repeated, treating the name with the respect of something sacred. In that moment, no confessions were needed. Both understood that some pain didn't require a name, because its silence was heavy enough. The late afternoon wind moved along the wooden fence, carrying with it the metallic scent of distant rain. Daniel was sharpening his knife when he heard footsteps stop behind him. Luna stood there, both hands gripping his jacket close. "I can't go back," she said. Her voice was steady, not pleading, just stating fact. Daniel nodded. "I know." She looked out toward the field, where the desert swallowed all traces of life. "After my mother died," Luna said slowly, "my stepfather became head of the household." Daniel didn't interrupt, his hands stilled on the whetstone. "Their laws say a woman must obey the man of the house. To keep peace." She gave a faint, bitter smile. "He said it was his right." Luna paused, drawing a deep breath. "At first, it was touches they called private matters. Then came the nights when I wasn't allowed to lock my door." Her voice didn't shake. "That's what made it heavier. When I said no," she continued, "he tore my clothes and said no one would believe me. There were no more details. None were needed." Daniel felt his jaw tighten, his knuckles white around the knife handle. But he didn't speak. This was her story to tell. "The day I ran," Luna said, "I had no time to take anything, no shoes, no water. I just ran." She looked down at her bare feet, the skin peeling and raw. "I ran until I forgot who I was." Daniel remembered the image at the ranch gate, the torn fabric, the bruised body, the whispered plea, "Stop looking." Everything fell into place like thunder after lightning. "When I told others," Luna went on, "they said family matters should stay inside the family. They said if I made trouble, the community would fall apart." She lifted her head, looking straight at Daniel. "They told me to disappear, and him?" Daniel asked, his voice low and dangerous. "He's still there, protected by their law," she answered. Silence settled between them. The wind stopped. Only bare truth remained in the open desert. Daniel stepped forward once, not to shield her, not to claim her. He stood there like a line drawn in the dirt. "Here," he said slowly. "There's no law that forces you to stay silent." Luna trembled, not from fear, but because, for the first time, someone had named the crime for what it was, and hadn't asked her to disappear to keep the peace. Out in the Wild West, sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't drawing a gun. It was refusing to let evil hide behind tradition any longer. They arrived early in the morning, when dew still clung to the dry grass. And the sun hadn't yet begun its assault. Daniel heard the hoofbeats before he saw them, a steady rhythm that spoke of men who had no need to hurry, because they believed what they came for wouldn't run. Luna was carrying water from the well when she stopped. Her hand tightened around the wooden bucket handle. She didn't turn around, but her entire body went rigid. "They're here," she said. Daniel set down his tools. Yeah, 3 Navajo men stopped at the edge of the ranch. No weapons raised. No shouting. Just watching. Their eyes passed over Daniel, then settled on Luna. Staying there a heartbeat longer than necessary. The man in the middle stepped forward. He was older, with silver streaking his black hair and a face carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice was calm, as if discussing the weather. "You don't belong here." Luna didn't step back. "I no longer belong where you come from, either." A small ripple of movement passed through the group. They weren't surprised, just having their suspicions confirmed. "The law needs to be resolved," the elder continued. "You return. Everything stays in order." Daniel stepped up beside Luna. He didn't draw a weapon, didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there. "In order for who?" he asked. The elder looked at Daniel, his gaze cold but not hostile. "For the tribe." Luna gave a soft, bitter laugh. "Not for me." A long silence followed. The wind swept across the field, lifting red dust into the air before letting it fall as if it had never risen. The elder gave a slow nod. "We didn't come to kill, we came to keep order." Daniel understood then. This was the most dangerous kind of threat, not an arrow or a gun, but reason wrapped around injustice. "Any order that needs someone silent to survive," Daniel said clearly, "isn't my kind of order." The elder looked at Luna one last time. "If you stay, you'll have no name, no family, no history." Luna lifted her chin. "I already lost all of that." There was no threat in response, no promise of revenge, just a nod of acceptance. The group turned their horses and rode away slowly, the same way they'd come. When the dust settled, Luna exhaled, long and heavy. Daniel didn't ask if she was all right. He only said, "They'll come back." Luna looked at the empty field. "Next time, they won't speak so gently." Daniel nodded. "Then, next time, you won't stand alone." In that quiet morning, they both understood, when the law chooses silence, standing beside each other is already an act of resistance. They returned in the late afternoon, when the mountain's shadow stretched long across the land like dark fingers reaching toward the ranch fence. This time there were more of them, not to apply pressure, but to witness. In the west, important decisions needed someone to remember. Luna stood in the open clearing, facing the council of elders. Daniel stepped half a pace back, not out of fear, but because this wasn't his choice to make. The silver-haired elder spoke, his voice low and measured. "You're called back to bring this matter to an end." Luna nodded. "Then let it end." Another elder stepped forward. "The law is clear. A family must have peace. The tribe must have peace." Luna lifted her head, her gaze come almost frighteningly so. Peace doesn't come from forcing someone into silence. A faint ripple of murmurs spread through the witnesses, then faded. Dissent didn't need to be loud, only well placed. "If you stay here," the first elder said, looking directly at her, "your name will be erased. No ceremony. No farewell. No one will speak of you again." Luna drew a breath, not deep, not shaky. She'd lived too long holding her breath. "Then erase it," she said. "A name didn't keep me alive. Staying silent never will." Daniel felt his hand tighten into a fist, but he didn't step forward. This was her moment. "You choose freedom over the tribe." One elder asked. Luna shook her head. "I choose truth over fear." Silence fell heavy and thick. The wind shifted. A hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp in the stillness. The silver-haired elder gave a slow nod. "The decision is heard." So to the consequence, there was no proclamation, no sentence read aloud. Just a collective step back from those who held the power to judge. They turned away, not one of them looked back. Luna stood still for a long time, as if waiting for an invisible blade to fall. But nothing came, only wind and earth remained. When there was nothing left but silence, Daniel stepped forward. He didn't touch her. He just stood beside her, facing the same direction. Luna exhaled, longer this time. "It's done," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, it's done." There was no victory. Only a woman standing tall after laying down what had crushed her for years. And out here in the Wild West, sometimes standing tall was the bravest thing a person could do. The tribe left as the sun dipped behind the low mountains. No shouting, no curses, just figures shrinking into the sunset. As if nothing had ever happened on this land, Luna stood watching until even the dust had settled. The wind passed through her hair, carrying the scent of dry earth and scorched grass. No one called her name anymore. No familiar eyes followed her. That emptiness didn't sting, was cold, hollow, like the space left after a tooth is pulled. Daniel said nothing. He'd learned that after great decisions, words only cheapened the weight. He fetched water, placed it beside her, then stepped back. As always, night fell quickly. The desert showed no mercy to those who stood still too long. When the first stars appeared, Luna finally spoke, her voice rough but steady. "They won't speak of me again." Daniel nodded. "No? Not in stories around the fire, not in names passed down, not in shared memory." He looked at the lantern swaying gently in the breeze. "But you're still here." Luna gave a faint smile, the kind that comes from knowing that to exist doesn't always mean to belong. The days that followed passed slowly. Luna worked not to prove anything, not to be accepted, just to keep her hands busy and her mind from drifting back. Daniel let her be. Some nights she woke to the wind, beating against the walls. Some mornings she stood long and still at the edge of the field, as if waiting for someone to call her name. But no one did. "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked once while they were mending a fence. Luna shook her head. "Regret is for people who had another choice." Daniel understood. Her freedom had come with loneliness, and that was the real price. But one afternoon, when clouds rolled in and the scent of rain moved through the wind, Luna stood next to Daniel, looking out at a field about to drink after a long drought. "I lost my old name," she said, almost to herself. Then she turned to him. "But I haven't lost myself." Daniel nodded. "That's enough to begin. Out here in the Wild West, not everyone who chose freedom was welcomed. But those who accepted its cost were often the ones who never bowed their heads again." The rain came late. One afternoon, without warning, as if the land had finally decided to let go. The first drops hit the wooden roof, heavy and loud. And then the sky opened wide. The cracked earth drank it like someone desperate with thirst. The scent of wet soil filled the air. Mixing with the smell of new grass, just beginning to wake, Luna stood on the porch, letting the rain soak her hair and shoulders. She tilted her face toward the sky, closed her eyes, and took a deep breaths. As if relearning how to breathe, Daniel stood beside her, not touching. He never rushed. He understood there were moments that didn't belong to words. Since the tribe had left, they'd lived beside each other in the slowest way possible. No promises, no labels. Just working together, eating together, fixing what was broken outside the fence. Inside the house, and within themselves, Luna grew stronger by the day, though she no longer needed to prove it. Daniel listened more than he spoke. They learned how to be near each other without needing more than that. One evening, when the wind was calm and the sky full of stars, Luna spoke first. "If I stay," she said, still looking at the oil lamp, "I don't want to be someone you took in out of pity." Daniel nodded. "And I don't want anyone to owe me anything." She turned to him. "Then we stand as equals." Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Yes. There was no confession of love, only a quiet agreement. The kind that lasts longer than any vow. They married on a simple morning. No music, no guests. Just the wind, the earth, and two rough silver rings Daniel had forged long ago. Luna placed her hand in his steady, without trembling. No one owns anyone, she said. Only choosing each other, Daniel replied. Then they went back to work, mending the fence, checking the well. Life didn't shift course because of a ceremony. It simply continued. A little lighter. When night fell, Luna sat on the porch, her back against a wooden post. Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder. This time, she didn't pull away. Not because she needed protection, but because she trusted. She had no tribe, no old name, but she had a home, one where no one asked her to stay silent in order to belong. Months passed. The desert bloomed after the rains. Small purple flowers appeared where nothing had grown before. Luna planted a garden: tomatoes, beans, herbs that reminded her of her mother. One morning, she woke with her hand on her stomach, feeling something she couldn't quite name yet. She looked at Daniel, who was brewing coffee over the fire. I think, she started, then paused. Daniel turned, reading her face. Understanding came slowly, then all at once. You sure? He asked quietly. She nodded. Not completely, but maybe. Daniel set down the coffee pot and came to sit beside her. What do you want? Luna looked out at the land they'd tended together. I want this child to know they're wanted. That they belong. That silence isn't the price of peace. They will, Daniel said. I promise you that. Epilogue, a legacy of dignity. The baby came in late spring when the desert was at its kindest. A girl with Luna's dark eyes and Daniel's steady spirit. They named her Rain, for the storm that had washed away the old world and made room for the new. As Rain grew, she learned to languages her mother's tongue, spoken quietly in the evenings, and her father's words, taught under the wide sky. She learned that strength wasn't about never falling, but about standing back up with dignity intact. Luna never spoke of the tribe that had erased her name, but sometimes, on quiet nights, she would sing the old songs to Rain, not in sorrow, but in remembrance. What was lost would be lost, but what remained would be honored. Daniel taught Rain to ride, to mend fences, to measure a person by their actions rather than their words. And he taught her the most important lesson of all, that respect costs nothing but means everything. Years later, when Rain was old enough to understand, Luna told her the story not with bitterness, but with truth. Rain listened with her mother's eyes and her father's quiet strength. You chose freedom, Rain said when the story ended. Luna nodded. I chose truth. Freedom came with it. And father chose to stand beside you. He did, Luna smiled. When everyone else looked away, he looked at what was right. Rain grew into a woman who never bowed her head for the wrong reasons. She married a man who treated her as an equal. She raised children who knew that peace built on silence was no peace at all. And the ranch, that small piece of land where Luna had first learned to breathe, again became known as a place where the broken could find rest, where the silenced could speak, where dignity was never negotiable. My dear friends, this story speaks to the quiet choices every person must face. No matter the time or place, Daniel wasn't a hero. He didn't overthrow the law. He made no grand declarations. He simply did something incredibly difficult. He looked away when respect was needed, and stood beside someone when courage mattered. In today's world, that's far harder than just saying the right things. We live in a society where following the rules is often used to excuse indifference. In workplaces, in families, in public life, there are moments when you see something wrong, but you're told, stay out of it, or let it go to keep the peace. And so silence becomes the price the weaker person has to pay. This story reminds us of one thing. Honor isn't about how many people you defeat. It's about not betraying your own conscience when no one else is watching. It's a simple lesson, but never easy to live by. When someone is hurting, start with respect, not curiosity. When you hear an uncomfortable truth, choose to listen, not to fix. Not to judge too quickly when a law or tradition demands someone stay silent for the greater good. Ask yourself, if that were me, would I accept it? You don't need to save the world. You just need to not turn your back at the wrong moment. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand still, stand tall, and say, you don't have to stay silent here. That's enough to change an entire life. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. The weather is getting colder now, so please take care of yourselves. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Type 3 in the comments if you felt something real. I truly appreciate all of you, the respected audience. Until next time, remember, dignity is never negotiable.